We're going to talk to Timothy. It says Timothy's in China, and he wonders if atheism is not self-contradictory. Timothy, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey.
Very
How
good.
are you guys?
Hey, we're doing okay. What do you mean by atheism and self-contradictory? Tell us why we're wrong here.
Well, I just wonder if atheism isn't self-contradictory in that
Can you start with
all humans,
Yeah,
like
Timmy, we saw that in the description. You're asking, is atheism? Yeah, we don't need you. So we already saw the thing. Is atheism self-contradictory? Paul literally just said, what do you mean by atheism and what do you mean by self-contradictory? We don't need you to repeat the thing. We need you to tell us what you mean by atheism and why you think it's self-contradictory.
the logic that leads to atheism, unlike the logic that leads to theism.
What do you mean by atheism? Atheism means lots of different things to lots of different people. So if we're going to have a productive conversation, we need to get on the same page about vocabulary. So what do you mean by atheism?
I mean the lack of belief in a God.
Okay. And what's required to not have a belief other than what's required to not have a belief other than I'm not convinced?
And internally inconsistent logic.
No, Timmy, listen to me very carefully. If I say I am not convinced of X, that is identical to I do not believe X. There's no logic behind that. There's no burden of proof. There's no positive claim. There is the rejection of a claim as unsubstantiated, or also it is the case that maybe you just haven't heard any argument or evidence. But if the only thing that is required is to not be convinced, that cannot be self-contradictory.
Would the thought of not being convinced not require logic?
No, people can be not convinced by maybe our hearts are hardened, or maybe we have an emotional, visceral reaction to God. Maybe the atheist doesn't believe it because they haven't heard anyone articulate it well. There's lots of reasons that someone might not yet be convinced that have nothing to do with.
I'm holding up a bag that's licorice. Are you convinced this bag of licorice has licorice in it, or are you convinced that it doesn't?
I am convinced it does.
Well, you're wrong. It's actually empty. It has nothing in it at all. But your state of not being convinced that the bag had licorice in it can't be self-contradictory, because you could say, I'm not convinced because I haven't seen sufficient evidence. And yet you, on the other hand, decided that you were convinced in a flawed sense of something that isn't true. That's one of the fundamental differences. Atheism, as the result of skepticism, properly assigns a burden of proof. And until that burden of proof is met, you can't be convinced. But it's also possible to not be convinced in the sense like a baby's not convinced, or a 5-year-old that heard about God the first time just said, well, I've heard the concept, but I'm not convinced. That's all there is. There's nothing self-contradictory about saying I'm not convinced. Where's the contradiction, I suppose? I say, I am not convinced a God exists. What does that contradict?
Okay. I look forward to watching this video back again later so I can fully take in your lesson regarding the bag there. It's contradictory in that we have to have assumptions.
Timmy.
Yes, ma'am?
I've just asked a very straightforward question. Are you going to answer it?
I am.
Cool. My question is, I'll repeat it. If I state I am not convinced, What does that contradict?
The logic that leads to not being convinced of God is self-contradictory.
Timmy, this is an incoherent.
Your disbelief is based
Timmy, you can just
in
stop.
proof.
You can stop, Timmy, because your response is incoherent. It's clear that you haven't grasped what I've said, so maybe it's better for you to go back and listen to it. Because if the statement is, I am not convinced, first of all, it's impossible for that to be self-contradictory. The statement is an assertion. Nothing in the statement contradicts itself. In your case, you're trying to pretend that it is contradictory with some logic, but you haven't demonstrated what logic it contradicts, just that you think it contradicts some logic. Well, I can understand that it contradicts, let's say, the findings of people who are convinced that there's a God. The issue is, should they be convinced? But when you say it's self-contradictory, that's already demonstrably false. And when I say, what does my not being convinced contradict? And your answer is the logic of blah, blah, blah. You still have all your work in front of you.
Right. So you cannot prove the proof. So whether or not you see the bag is not something that you can know logically. You can only assume it. Therefore, to say that you don't believe in God is self-contradictory.
Timmy. Okay, Timmy is incoherent and nonsensical.
Timmy, would you accept the premise that
is?
Timmy,
Probably
would you
both.
accept
Your argument definitely is.
I see.
Would you accept the premise that?
Here we go.
Would you accept the premise that some people believe things that are indeterminate, as in that the evidence they haven't thought it through, they haven't been exposed to the full argument. Would you agree that is the case?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And
absolutely.
So if you applied that to a God claim, you absolutely could have people that have either not considered it in any kind of meaningful way and or have not been exposed to meaningful arguments about it. That kind of person can exist, right? So is that person also self-contradictory in your model?
I would say that this person would be dogmatic.
Why? If they've not, someone who has given it someone who's given it largely insufficient consideration is simultaneously dogmatic?
Yes, I would say that everyone contains logical flaws, no matter how.
No, that's not what I'm asking. That's because Timmy, someone who's not given it,
you've described, someone would be dogmatic.
But how is someone who's given it no consideration simultaneously dogmatic?
They've merely asserted it without any
as in they've given it no consideration. Like I have given no consideration to any number of things. I don't know. Is Love Island still a show? I don't know. Maybe Love Island is still a show. I've given no consideration to who the winner of the next episode, the next season of Love Island is going to be. Does that mean I'm dogmatic about Love Island?
Is everything I say going to be considered absolutely incorrect, no matter what? Could I call you by your name and still be incorrect?
I told you. This is not a serious person. This is not an honest person. This person is incoherent and dishonest.
You mean my argument, not me. I understand.
No, you. I don't mean your argument. I don't mean your argument. I mean you. You are dishonest as fuck. Because we're sitting here trying to, oh dear.
Matt, you seem like a nice person to me as far as I can tell.
Clutch your pearls, bitch. I'm talking to you. You think that... I rest my case. Thank you so much for proving me right repeatedly. This has been a waste of time. You can go away now.
Thanks for calling to me, or maybe not.
You're not an honest interlocutor, not even in the slightest. We've pointed out your incoherence. We pointed out your problems. And then you decided to do well, nothing I say is going to be, okay. So poor pitiful me. I didn't call into your show and make a claim that I refuse to defend. Paul was incredibly kind to you from the start, asking you to define atheism, which you then refused to do, but then got around to it. And I pointed out, when you say atheism is self-contradictory, for a statement of I'm not convinced, it is impossible for that to be self-contradictory. And then when we asked you what it was contradictory with, you could not give an explanation. And when Paul and I tried to point out the problems with what you're saying, you decided that'd be a really good time to whine about how just anything I say is not going to be right. That's not our problem. That's not our fault. There are plenty of other callers who've called in, and they were able to say things that were coherent, that were correct, that were worth listening to, that weren't fallacious, and we were able to have a conversation. You can blame your failures on me all you want, and you can sit there and laugh while you down your copium, but you're not going to rile me up. I've already figured you out. Goodbye.
All right. Well, we have a couple more theists on ready to talk to us, so hopefully this goes a little better.
Wow, that was a great clip we just watched. Hey, Eve, what should the people do now?
Leave a comment, click like, subscribe, patreon.com/ does that say call the line?
Yeah. But if you could have made, we could just make it a little more natural. On the next clip, the outro will be much better.